Daniel sat in silence. The room was cold, dim, and metallic, built with no comfort in mind. The walls curved slightly, humming with the steady pulse of alien machinery. To him, it felt like a cage, even though his wrists were free. He had been here for days, maybe weeks, he wasn't sure anymore. Time had begun to blur into one endless stretch of gray. He had once been a soldier of Earth, proud and determined, but now he was only a man who had lost too much. His squad was gone. His friends were gone. He still remembered the smell of smoke when his base was attacked, the sound of screams fading into silence, and the sharp finality of bodies that would never move again. All of it haunted him every time he closed his eyes, and now across from him stood her. She was nothing like the monsters he had been trained to fight. When Earth's leaders had spoken of the invaders, they painted pictures of beasts, soulless, merciless, and cruel. But the girl in front of him looked fragile. Her skin shimmered faintly like silver beneath the light, smooth and almost delicate. Her wide eyes, the color of deep violet, carried no hatred. They carried something else, something Daniel could not name, something close to fear. She did not stand tall like a soldier. Instead, her shoulders bent slightly forward, like she was trying to make herself smaller, less threatening. She held a small tray in her hands. On it was food. Alien food, soft glowing fruit, and bread-like slices that smelled faintly sweet. She placed it gently in front of him, then stepped back. For a moment she just stared as if waiting for him to speak, but Daniel stayed quiet. Silence was his shield, and he wore it tightly. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was soft, trembling, unsure in his language. "Human," she whispered. "They told me to watch you, but I don't want to hurt you." Daniel's jaw tightened. He kept his eyes on the floor. He had heard too many lies during this war. He didn't want to believe anything that came from their mouths, even from someone who looked like her. The alien girl shifted her weight, as if waiting for him to answer. When he gave her nothing, she lowered her gaze and slowly sat down across from him. For a while, neither spoke. The room carried only the hum of machines and the faint dripping sound from a distant pipe. Inside, Daniel fought with himself. Part of him wanted to yell, to spit his rage at her, to tell her that her people had destroyed everything he loved. But another part of him felt exhausted. Rage was heavy and he was tired of carrying it. So he said nothing. The girl tried again, her voice trembling. "I see your pain," she said carefully. "I don't understand it, but I want to." Daniel almost laughed at that, a sharp, bitter laugh, but it caught in his throat. What could she possibly understand? She wasn't human. She didn't know what it meant to lose family, to bury friends, to carry grief like a stone in the chest. She couldn't. So he turned his face away, hoping that silence would push her back, but it didn't. Instead, she stayed. Every day she came. Sometimes she brought food. Sometimes she tried to speak his language more. She asked simple questions, his name, his age, what Earth was like. Most times, Daniel ignored her. Other times, he gave one-word answers. Still, she didn't leave. And then one night, the quiet broke. Daniel had been staring at the metal ceiling, lost in thought, when he heard her voice. This time it wasn't calm. It wasn't soft. It cracked, raw with emotion. "Tell me," she whispered, standing in the doorway with her hands clenched tightly at her sides. "What do I have to do to bond with you, human?" Her words cut through the silence like a blade. Daniel turned to look at her, surprised. Her violet eyes were wet with tears that shimmered under the dim light. Her chest rose and fell quickly, like someone trying not to cry too loudly. "I don't want to be your enemy," she said, voice shaking. "I don't want to be like the others. I don't want to live like this. I want to understand you, please." The sight of her broke something in him. She was not a soldier in that moment. She was just desperate. Desperate not to be alone. Desperate to be seen. Daniel's throat tightened. For a second he almost spoke. He wanted to tell her about his pain, his loss, the anger that burned inside him. But the words stuck heavy and sharp. He clenched his fists instead, nails biting into his palms. She looked at him with such raw hope, as if his answer could change everything. And maybe it could. But Daniel wasn't ready to give it. Not yet. He turned his head away again, though this time it wasn't out of hate. It was fear. Fear of feeling again. Fear of trusting. The girl's shoulders shook. For a moment she stood there silently, her breath unsteady. Then she whispered one last time, so softly he almost didn't hear it. "Please, don't shut me out." And then she left. The door slid closed with a hiss and Daniel was alone once more, but the silence no longer felt like a shield. It felt heavier, emptier. That night he could not sleep. The image of her tearful eyes stayed with him. He had spent so long hating her kind, but when he thought of her, small, trembling, desperate for connection, he could not see a monster. He saw something else, something painfully close to human. And for the first time since the war began, Daniel wondered if maybe, just maybe, the world was not as simple as enemies and allies, human and alien. Maybe there was something more, something he wasn't ready to name yet. The days after her outburst were different. Daniel noticed it first in the silence. Before she used to come quietly, bringing food and soft attempts at conversation. But now when she entered, he could sense the change. Her movements were slower, her eyes heavier. She placed the tray down without a word and lingered only a little before leaving again. Daniel told himself he didn't care. He told himself that her sadness wasn't his problem. She was the enemy. She was a part of the same force that had taken everything from him. He had no reason to care. But the truth was, her silence bothered him more than her words ever did. He found himself waiting for her to speak. He found himself watching her violet eyes when she bent her head, wishing she would look at him again. Each time she left without saying anything, the room seemed colder. One evening, when the ship's lights dimmed to mark the alien version of night, Daniel sat on the floor, staring at the untouched tray of food. His stomach was tight with hunger, but he wasn't thinking about eating. He was thinking about her, about the way her voice had broken when she had begged him not to shut her out. He hated himself for remembering. He hated himself for caring, but the memory wouldn't leave. The door hissed open and she entered again. Lyra. He still didn't know her name yet, though it rested silently on her lips. She carried the tray as always, but her steps were hesitant. She looked tired, as if she had been fighting battles invisible to him. When she placed the food down, Daniel finally spoke. His voice was rough, almost unfamiliar to his own ears. "Why do you keep coming?" The question startled her. Her head snapped up and her eyes widened. For a long moment she didn't answer. Then slowly she sat across from him on the floor, folding her slender hands in her lap. "Because," her voice cracked and she stopped to breathe. "Because I don't want to be alone anymore." Daniel blinked. He had expected her to say something about duty or orders or curiosity. But not that. Her hands trembled as she tried to explain. "I was taken when I was small. They made me serve in the war. I obeyed because I was afraid. But then I saw you. You didn't look at me like the others did. You didn't scream, you didn't curse. You only sat with your pain, and I thought, maybe if I could understand you, maybe if you let me, I wouldn't feel so empty." Daniel's chest tightened. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He didn't know what to say. Lyra's violet eyes glistened as she whispered the words again, the ones that had haunted him for days. "What do I have to do to bond with you, human?" The plea broke from her like a cry she had been holding too long. Her voice was soft but full of desperation, like every piece of her hope rested on his answer. Daniel felt his throat close. He wanted to tell her no. He wanted to push her away, to keep the walls around his heart. But when he saw her trembling shoulders, he couldn't. She wasn't his enemy in that moment. She wasn't a soldier. She was just a girl who wanted connection. He drew a slow breath, his voice low. "You don't understand," he said. "Bonding. It's not something you can force. It's not a trick. It's trust. And trust is broken for me. I don't know if I can give it again." Lyra leaned forward, her face filled with pain. "Then teach me. Show me how. I don't want to be like them. I don't want to destroy. I want to feel." Daniel shook his head, trying to steady himself. "You can't know what it means. You haven't lost what I've lost." "I've lost," she said sharply, surprising him. Her hands curled into fists and her voice grew stronger. "I lost my family. I lost my freedom. I lost everything that made me who I was. Do you think I don't feel pain?" Her sudden fire left Daniel speechless. She wasn't lying. He could see it in her eyes, in the way her voice broke on the word family. She carried her own grief, her own chains. Silence stretched between them again, but it wasn't the heavy silence of strangers. It was something else, something raw, unfinished, but alive. Daniel finally whispered, "What's your name?" The question hit her like a spark. Her lips parted, and for the first time since they met, her face lit with fragile hope. "Lyra," she breathed. "My name is Lyra. Daniel repeated it softly as if testing the sound. Lyra. Her eyes shimmered with tears again, but this time they weren't only from sadness. There was... For the first time, Daniel felt the smallest crack in the wall he had built around himself. It wasn't trust yet. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was something he had thought he would never give again. And Lyra saw it. She saw it in the way he had spoken her name. Her lips trembled into the faintest smile, a fragile thing that seemed ready to break at the slightest touch. When she left that night, Daniel found himself whispering her name again into the empty room. Lyra. The silence felt different now, not as heavy, not as lonely. And for the first time in weeks, Daniel wondered if maybe he wasn't completely lost. Daniel sat against the cold wall of his cell, his arms resting on his knees. The air smelled faintly metallic, mixed with the strange sweetness of alien fruit he had not touched. His body was alive, but inside he felt hollow. Even after saying Lyra's name the night before, he was not ready to let her in. He remembered her wide violet eyes shining with hope when he spoke to her. That fragile smile had stayed in his mind all night. It made something inside him stir, something he thought had died with his friends. And that scared him. He told himself that caring was dangerous. Caring made you weak. Caring meant losing again. He had already lost enough. The door hissed and Lyra entered quietly. She was carrying another tray, this time with a steaming bowl of something that looked closer to human food. She placed it down in front of him without a word, then sat across from him. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched until Daniel finally broke it. Why are you doing this? His voice was rough, like stone scraping against stone. Lyra looked down at her hands, then back at him. Because I can't stop, she admitted softly. If I walk away, I'll be empty again. And if I try, maybe I can change something. Maybe I can change you. Daniel's chest tightened at her words. He wanted to shout at her, to tell her she could never understand what he carried. Instead, he spoke through clenched teeth. You don't understand. My brothers are dead. My home is gone. Your people burned it all. And you ask me to bond? To trust? He laughed bitterly, but there was no joy in the sound. You'll never know what that word means to us. Lyra flinched as if struck. Her hands curled into fists in her lap, her violet eyes glistening with tears, but she didn't look away. Then teach me, she whispered fiercely. Show me. Don't hide behind your pain in silence. If bonding means trust, then I will fight for it. If it means loss, then I will share that loss. But don't push me away because of what others did. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. I am not them. I don't want to destroy you. I want to know you. Daniel looked at her, his jaw tight, his breath uneven. She was trembling, but there was fire in her words. She wasn't lying. She wasn't just saying what she thought he wanted to hear. She meant it, and yet, he turned his face away. You're asking me to do something I can't. Lyra's chest rose and fell quickly, her heart pounding. Why can't you? Because if I let you in, Daniel said bitterly, I'll lose you too. Everyone I care about dies. Everyone I let close is taken from me. Do you understand what that feels like? Do you? The words echoed in the small room. Daniel's voice broke at the end, his pain spilling out for the first time in weeks. He hadn't meant to say so much, but it escaped him before he could stop it. Lyra sat in silence, her eyes wide, her throat tight with emotion. Then slowly she reached out her hand, though it trembled. She didn't touch him, only held it out in the empty space between them. I understand, she whispered. Not in your way, but I lost too. They took me from my family when I was a child. I was raised in steel halls like this one, told to obey, told to fight. I don't remember the warmth of my mother's voice. I don't remember my father's face. Do you know what that feels like? To know you belong to no one? Her voice broke and tears slid silently down her silver cheeks. I want to belong to something. To someone. Not as a soldier. Not as a servant, just as me. Daniel stared at her. Her hand hung in the air between them, trembling, waiting, hoping. He wanted to take it. He wanted to close the distance. But his own hand stayed clenched against his knee. His heart pounded painfully in his chest. She was asking for something so simple yet so impossible. He couldn't let her in. Not yet. So he whispered, almost too quietly, I can't. Her hand fell back to her lap, her eyes closed as if the weight of the world pressed down on her. But when she opened them again, there was no anger in her gaze. Only sadness and determination. I won't give up, she said softly. Not on you. The word struck Daniel like an arrow. He wanted to tell her to stop. He wanted to demand that she leave him alone. But no words came. Lyra stood slowly, her hands trembling at her sides. She picked up the empty tray and turned toward the door. Before stepping out, she looked back one last time, her violet eyes shining in the dim light. You don't have to let me in today, she said, or tomorrow, or the day after. But I will keep coming, Daniel. I will keep trying, because I believe there is something inside you worth knowing. The door hissed shut behind her. Daniel pressed his palms against his face, his breath ragged. For the first time in weeks, he felt the walls around his heart shake. Not fall, but crack just slightly, and that terrified him more than any weapon. The cell was quiet again, but the silence was no longer the same. It was filled with the memory of her voice, the fire in her eyes, and the sound of her plea. Daniel sat on the floor, staring at the ceiling, his mind running in circles. He wanted to believe he could remain untouched, but Lyra's words had pierced through cracks he didn't. No still existed. I won't give up on you. Those words haunted him more than the screams of the battlefield. When the door hissed open the next morning, Daniel found himself looking up quickly. He hated the way his chest tightened at the sight of her. Lyra entered slowly, her small hands holding the tray. She placed it down in front of him, but instead of leaving, she lowered herself to the floor and sat cross-legged. Today, there was no attempt at forcing him to speak first. Instead, she looked at him with steady eyes. Her expression was calm, though her fingers twisted together nervously in her lap. Daniel shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. What? He muttered, his voice rough. She took a shaky breath. I want to tell you my story. Daniel blinked, surprised. Why? Because you think I don't understand pain, she said quietly. Because you think I can never know what loss means. You are wrong. Her words carried no anger, only sadness. Daniel didn't answer. He turned his face away, but he didn't stop her from speaking. Lyra folded her hands tightly as if holding herself together. When I was a child, I lived in a place filled with light. My people, they sing with their skin. Our homes would glow with colors when families were happy. I remember lying beside my mother, watching her palms glow golden as she sang me to sleep. That is the last clear memory I have of her. Her voice trembled, but she kept going. One day, soldiers came. They were not from your world. They were from mine. They took the children, all of us, and brought us to ships. They said we would serve the empire. They said family was weakness. They told us we belonged to no one but the war. Daniel's chest tightened. He looked at her then, really looked. Her violet eyes shimmered with pain, her silver skin dim under the cold light of the cell. They trained us, she continued, her voice breaking. They made us watch as others were punished. They told us never to cry, never to speak of family, never to dream of freedom. And I obeyed. Because I was afraid. A tear slid down her cheek. She brushed it away quickly, but another followed. For years, I was alone in a crowd of soldiers. No one cared for me. No one even said my name. Do you know what that does to someone? To feel invisible? To feel like your soul is fading away? Her voice cracked on the last word. She lowered her head, hiding her face in her trembling hands. Daniel sat frozen. He had thought of her as fragile, maybe even naive, but not this. He hadn't imagined she carried scars that were invisible but just as deep as his own. Something inside him twisted. He remembered the night he had held his friend's hand as the life left his body. He remembered screaming for help that never came. He remembered the emptiness afterward, the silence of loss. And now, looking at Lyra, he realized she knew that silence too. For a long time, Daniel said nothing. His throat was too tight, but at last in a low voice he whispered, "What's your name?" Lyra's head snapped up. Her eyes widened, shimmering with surprise. For a moment she just stared at him as if she had not heard correctly. My name?" she asked, almost breathless. Daniel nodded. His voice was still rough but gentler than before. "Yes, your name." Her lips trembled. "Lyra," she whispered. "My name is Lyra." Daniel repeated it slowly, tasting the sound. Lyra. The way he said it made her chest tighten. No one had spoken her name like that in years, softly as if it mattered. Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were different. They were warm, trembling with fragile hope. Daniel looked away quickly, ashamed of the strange warmth in his own chest. "Lyra," he muttered again as if grounding himself in the sound. She smiled then. It was small, faint, and trembling, but it was real. "Thank you," she whispered. The silence that followed was no longer heavy. It was gentle, like a quiet breath between two people who were no longer strangers. Lyra stayed longer that day. She didn't press him with questions. She didn't beg him to open up. She simply sat there, her presence filling. He bit into it. The taste was strange, sweet but bitter, soft but chewy. His face twisted slightly. "Not terrible," he muttered. Lyra laughed, a soft musical sound that made the cold room feel alive. "Not terrible," she repeated, her smile wide. For the first time in months, Daniel felt something stir in his chest, something close to warmth. That night, he spoke more. He told her about Earth. He spoke of blue skies, the smell of rain on soil, the way waves crashed against the shore. His voice softened as he remembered music, the kind made with strings, drums, and voices that rose in harmony. He told her about bread fresh from an oven, about laughter around a fire, about children running through open fields. Lyra listened with wide eyes, drinking in every word as if each one was precious. Her lips parted slightly, and her palms glowed faintly as she imagined the things he described. "It sounds beautiful," she whispered. Daniel shrugged, but his gaze softened. It was before the war. Silence followed, but it was not heavy. It was filled with something new, shared memory, shared longing. Then Lyra lifted her hands, cupping them together. "Do you want to hear how we sing?" Daniel frowned. "Sing? With your skin?" She nodded. Closing her eyes, she focused. Slowly, her silver skin began to shimmer. At first it was faint, a soft blue glow spreading across her palms. Then, as her breath steadied, the light grew brighter, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Colors shifted, blue to gold, gold to violet, violet to soft crimson. The cell filled with living light. It danced on the walls, painting them with warmth. The hum of the ship seemed to fade away, replaced by the rhythm of her glowing song. Daniel stared, speechless. He had seen weapons, explosions, fire in the sky, but nothing like this. It wasn't just light, it was emotion. He could feel it deep in his chest. The blue carried calm, the gold warmth, the violet longing. When the colors dimmed and faded back into her skin, Lyra opened her eyes. She looked at him nervously. "That is how we remember joy," she whispered. "Our people sing with light. My mother sang to me when I was small." Daniel swallowed hard, his throat tight. He wanted to tell her how beautiful it was, how it had touched something inside him that he thought was gone. But the words stuck. Instead, he nodded slowly. "It's something," he managed. Lyra smiled faintly. She had seen the way his eyes had softened even if he didn't say more. That night, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling. For the first time since being captured, he didn't feel completely broken. He had remembered Earth with warmth instead of only pain. And Lyra's song, it had reached him in a way he could not deny. The next day, when she entered again, Daniel did something that surprised even himself. He gestured to the space beside him. "Sit here," he said quietly. Lyra's eyes widened, then brightened with joy. She sat next to him instead of across, their shoulders almost touching. For a while, they simply ate in silence. But this silence was no longer empty. It was full of something fragile, something growing. "Finally," Daniel whispered. "Lyra." She turned to him, her violet eyes shining. "Thank you," he said simply. Her lips parted in surprise, then curved into a trembling smile. "You're welcome, Daniel." And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, Daniel realized he didn't feel like a prisoner anymore. He felt like a man who was beginning to heal. The fragile peace did not last. For several days, Daniel and Lyra grew closer. They spoke more, shared little things, and sometimes even laughed together. It was not the loud laughter of old friends, but the soft, careful sound of two lonely souls who had finally found a place of comfort. Daniel began to feel alive again. He still missed Earth, still carried pain in his chest, but the weight of hopelessness had lightened. Lyra's presence gave him something to hold on to, something that reminded him he was more than just a prisoner. But peace was a fragile thing, and war always found a way to destroy it. One night, as Daniel lay on the cold bed, alarms suddenly screamed through the ship. Red lights flashed across the walls, painting everything in violent color. He sat up sharply, his heart racing. He could hear shouting in the distance, the heavy stomp of boots, the clash of metal. Moments later, the cell door burst open. Lyra rushed inside, her silver skin glowing faintly with panic. Her violet eyes were wide, her breathing quick. "Daniel," she gasped. "You must listen." "What's happening?" he demanded. She hesitated only a moment before whispering. "The council has decided. They do not want to keep human prisoners anymore. They see it as weakness. They gave the order to—" Her voice broke. "To execute you." Daniel froze. His chest tightened as if iron bands had wrapped around his ribs. He had expected death many times before, but now it felt different. He had finally begun to feel alive again. And suddenly life was being stolen from him. His voice was sharp, almost bitter. "So this is it then? After all your kindness, after everything, you're here to finish the job?" Lyra flinched at his words, pain flashing across her face. "No," she cried, her voice breaking. "I came to save you. I cannot let them hurt you. Not anymore." Daniel stared at her, searching her trembling face. There was no lie in her eyes, only fear. Only desperation. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why risk everything for me? I'm your enemy." Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Because you are not just an enemy to me anymore. You are Daniel. You are the human who showed me Earth through your words, who listened to my light song without hate. You are the first person who ever made me feel—" She stopped herself, shaking her head. "Please, there is no time. We must go." Footsteps thundered down the corridor. Voices barked orders in the alien tongue. Daniel's hands shook as adrenaline rushed through him. "How?" he asked. "This cell is locked and I don't know the way." Lyra pressed her palm to the wall panel. Her skin glowed, her light song weaving into the circuits. The door clicked, then slid open. "I will guide you," she whispered. "But once we leave this place, there is no going back for me. My people will see me as a traitor." For a moment, Daniel hesitated. He had wanted freedom for so long, but the cost of her sacrifice burned in his chest. "Lyra," he said softly, "if you stay, they might forgive you." "Don't throw everything away for me." Her eyes shimmered with tears. "What do I have to do to bond with you, human?" She whispered fiercely. "If saving your life is the price, then I will pay it." The words struck deep. Daniel's throat tightened, and for once he had no answer. All he could do was nod. "Then let's go." They slipped into the corridor. The ship shook as explosions echoed in the distance, perhaps from another battle outside. Shadows ran across the walls as soldiers rushed past, weapons in hand. Lyra held Daniel's wrist firmly, guiding him through the maze of halls. Her glow flickered faintly, just enough to open doors, never enough to draw attention. Daniel kept close, his heart pounding with each step. At one corner, they nearly collided with two guards. Lyra reacted instantly, pressing her palms together. A flash of blinding light burst from her skin, dazzling the soldiers. Daniel lunged forward, slamming his shoulder into one and knocking him to the ground. They didn't stop to fight. They ran. The corridors seemed endless, the alarm screaming louder and louder. Daniel's lungs burned, but he kept running. Not for himself, he could have given up long ago. He ran because Lyra was risking everything for him. Finally, they reached a wide chamber. At the far end stood a small hangar, where sleek escape pods rested like silent lifeboats. But between them and freedom, a group of armed soldiers waited, weapons raised. Daniel's stomach dropped. "We'll never make it," he muttered. Lyra stepped forward, her body trembling. Her eyes locked onto his, fierce and unbroken. "Stay behind me." Before he could protest, she raised her hands. Light exploded from her skin, brighter than anything Daniel had ever seen. It was not just color this time, it was pure emotion. Blue waves of calm rippled through the air. Golden warmth pulsed like a heartbeat. Crimson fire blazed with fierce defiance. The soldiers staggered, shielding their eyes, some crying out as the colors pierced their minds. Lyra's song filled the chamber, vibrating in the air, pressing against Daniel's very soul. He had never heard anything so powerful. It was not just beauty, it was sacrifice, it was love, it was desperation poured into light. "Go!" she screamed through the glow. Daniel's legs moved before his mind could catch up. He sprinted across the chamber, heart hammering, every step feeling like it might be his last. He reached the pod, slamming his hand against the panel. The hatch opened with a hiss, but when he turned back, his heart nearly broke. Lyra was still standing in the middle of the chamber, her glow flickering weakly now, her body shaking. The soldiers were recovering, their weapons slowly rising again. "Lyra!" Daniel shouted, his voice raw. She looked at him with a trembling smile, tears in her glowing eyes. Live, Daniel, she whispered. That is all I ask. And then she collapsed, her body crumpling as the light around her died. Daniel's scream echoed through the chamber. He wanted to run to her, to drag her into the pod, to save her as she had saved him, but the soldiers were already aiming, already closing in. With tears blinding his vision, he stumbled into the pod. The hatch sealed. Engines roared. The pod blasted away from the ship, leaving behind the girl who had given everything. As stars streaked past the window, Daniel pressed his forehead to the glass. His chest shook with silent grief. For the first time in his life, he realized something he had never expected. An alien girl had shown him what humanity truly meant, and he had left part of his heart behind with her. The escape pod drifted through the silent ocean of stars. Inside, Daniel sat with his head bowed, his hands clenched tightly against his knees. His body shook, not from fear but from grief. He had made it out alive. He had escaped death, but his heart felt as though it had been left behind, still lying on that cold alien floor where Lyra had fallen. The pod hummed softly, its controls glowing faint green. Automated systems kept it steady, pushing it toward the nearest human beacon. Daniel barely noticed. His eyes were red and swollen, his throat raw from shouting her name into the void. Lyra, he whispered, the sound breaking in his chest. You saved me and I left you. He pressed his forehead against the glass, staring out at the stars. They glittered like cold fire, endless and uncaring, yet one star seemed brighter than the others, a faint violet shimmer in the black. His heart ached at the sight. It reminded him of her eyes. Hours passed. He sat in silence, replaying every moment they had shared. The awkward meals, the first time he laughed again, the way she listened when he spoke of Earth, the way her skin glowed with her light song. And finally, the way she stood between him and death, her entire being blazing with colors of sacrifice. The pod jolted suddenly. A voice crackled through the speakers. This is the UES Horizon. Escape pod, identify yourself. Daniel blinked, slowly lifting his head. His voice was hoarse as he answered. Daniel Hayes, Sergeant, human prisoner. I escaped. There was a pause. Then a rush of voices and static. We have you, Sergeant. Hold on. We're bringing you in. Relief should have filled him, but it didn't. As the Horizon's docking arms reached out and pulled the pod inside, Daniel felt only the weight of emptiness. The hatch opened. Hands reached in, pulling him out. Faces surrounded him. Humans, his people. They cheered. Some clapped his back, some cried with joy to see him alive. But their voices sounded distant, muffled, as if they were behind a wall. Daniel's eyes searched the crowd, but he was not looking for them. He was looking for violet eyes, for silver skin, for the glow of a song that would never come again. Later, they asked him what had happened, how he escaped, who had helped him. Daniel told them the truth. Not all of it. Some things were too precious, too sacred to give away to curious ears. But he told them enough. She was one of them, he said quietly. But she was not my enemy. She saved me. She gave her life for mine. Some of the soldiers frowned, unable to understand. Others shook their heads in disbelief. A few looked thoughtful, their eyes softening with something close to sorrow. Daniel didn't care what they believed. He knew the truth. Days turned to weeks. Daniel recovered, his body healing, but his heart still carried the wound. At night, when the ship was quiet, he would sit alone by the viewing windows and stare at the stars. He would remember her light, her laughter, the way she had asked him, "What do I have to do to bond with you, human?" And he realized something. She had already bonded with him. Not through blood, not through oath, not through command, but through kindness, through sacrifice, through the fragile bridge of trust they had built in the darkest of places. One evening, the Horizon's captain approached him. "You should rest, Sergeant," she said gently. "You've been through enough." Daniel shook his head. His voice was steady, though soft. "I can't rest, not yet. She gave me her life. I have to give something back." The captain studied him. "What do you mean?" Daniel looked back out at the stars, his eyes burning with quiet fire. "I'm going to carry her story. People need to know that not all enemies are monsters, that even in war humanity isn't just ours." She proved it. And so he began. He wrote her memory into reports, though the officials only skimmed them. He told her story to soldiers at the mess table, and their laughter grew quiet as they listened. He whispered her name into the silence of empty rooms, keeping it alive. Over time, his tale spread. The alien girl who saved a human, they called it. Some dismissed it as fantasy, but others clung to it like a spark of hope. And to those who asked him why he spoke of her so often, he always gave the same answer. Because she showed me what it means to be human. She showed me that light exists even in the darkest places. Years later, when the war finally ended and peace was written between the two species, Daniel stood on Earth once more. The skies were blue again, the air smelled of soil and rain, and children ran through fields just as he had remembered. In the middle of a quiet meadow, Daniel built a small stone monument. Upon it he carved words in both human and alien script. To Lyra, who sang with light, who gave her life and who proved that even enemies can love. He stood there for a long time, the wind brushing through the grass, and as the sun set, painting the sky with violet and gold, Daniel closed his eyes. He could almost hear her laughter again. He could almost see her glowing hands painting the air with colors. He could almost feel the warmth of her presence beside him. And for the first time in a long time, his grief softened into something else. Not loss, not emptiness, but love. Because though she was gone, her bond with him remained. A light that would never die,